Thank you very much, Liam. I'm excited this afternoon to be joined by Phil. I've known Phil. We were trying to do a catch-up, weren't we? For about 5 years, I've known you in different organisations. And Phil, finally, I've been asking him for a while to use his expert knowledge to present a webinar for us, based hosted today by Deventure Education. For those who don't know Phil, Phil has a background of digital change. I suppose the idea of specializing in student success, education, technology, digital transformation. Um, what he'll present today, and as I know Phil for a while, it's going to be about making people think. It's very thought provoking, gives practical insights about things, and provides like real life challenges. So I'm really looking forward to the idea of AI because there's been a lot of coverage on AI, but there hasn't been a lot about from the student perspective. So I'm interested, and hopefully all those people attending today will be able to hear about Phil's ideas and thoughts about the student and AI. So with further ado, Phil, over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me over. And as Andy says, I've had a bit of a varied background in digital particularly, but before then I was very much a teacher for many years, and I used to ingrain kind of technology within my teaching across a number of areas. And one of the big things is from the FE background I started in and then moving into HE, one of the big things is I kind of embraced AI really early. And one of the things that I did in my previous organisation was within about a couple of months of it coming out, I did a staff training session to just try and raise the profile of what it was. And I think the big thing to kind of think about is AI is not coming now, it's very much here. And I think we've got to understand that we automatically as educators start looking at how students are going to use it for cheating, but if we really drill down, students are now using it for learning, searching, drafting, planning, revising. And it's a world now that AI is just integrated into what we are using. If you look at any of the new releases with Apple or Microsoft, it is always talking about the integration of AI. So this is going to be quite an honest talk, and the idea is I want to kind of question some of the assessment assumptions. We've got to remember we built all the assessments pre-AI, and if you haven't looked to review your assessments, then we really are at risk of AI, because the risk is we keep assessing the wrong thing, and if we're not careful, that is going to have a detrimental effect down the line. So I've got a kind of, if people have got the phones handy, and I'll come back to this, but if you can just scan that and then put some answers, and then like I say, I'll come back to what people have put. But I'm just interested to know, just generally, where is your organisation's position on AI? Because I think it's really interesting when you start talking across the sector. There's a lot of assumptions where a lot of organisations are at, and this might be a response from your department if you don't want to look at the organisation side. But I'm just really intrigued to understand where your position is currently around AI. So I'll just give you another moment to scan that and start putting some answers, and like I say, I'll refer back to it a bit later on.
Are you happy, Phil, to for people to put things in the chat as well?
Yes, yeah, by all means, put it into the chat as well. Yeah, I'm happy for that. So one of the things is, the challenge is the assessment. We put it on the students using AI and we say that's the issue, but actually it's the assessment. We're not designing assessments that is really testing the students in the way that they are now. If we keep to the traditional methods such as essays, MCQs and problem sets, we know AI can kind of answer that. You know, in the early days of AI, when people didn't realize that what you put into it, it would actually learn from what you put in. And we had a member of staff at a previous organization that they put in their multiple choice exam and AI got it wrong. They put it through again, and guess what? It got a few more correct, because what they did was they actually said to the AI, oh, you got that bit wrong. And then they did it again. And actually, by the third time, the AI had actually got all the answers correct. But what I then told them was, but you've trained the AI to make sure that they got those answers correct. We know that AI is now really evolving, so now you don't even have to train it for it to actually think a lot more and get to those answers. Now here's some stats. So these are obviously only the students that are willing to answer the question, but at the minute there is 88% students that have used AI tools for assessment. Now that doesn't mean they've used it to write the assessment, but it is actually about using AI as part of the assessment. There is an increase of AI cheating. So again, organisations that are hot on that are really pushing through to test. And the other side of this is 6% of grading time can be reduced from AI tools. So there is this side of the fact that some staff might actually start to use it to mark their work. And again, that's a different kind of conversation, which I won't go over today. But if the AI is already shaping our students to learn and prepare work, the real question is, what do we assess now? And I think that is the overriding question that we need to start thinking about. If we know that content is so quickly to get, what skills do we want students to start showing? So moving on from there, we can start looking at how our students actually use AI. So at the moment, students will use it for things like solving problems, drafting assignments, generating ideas, summarising readings, explaining concepts. It's very much that it's now embedded within the way they learn, they research and they write. Now, we have got students that will say they don't want to use AI as part of the environmental impact, the fact that they feel like it's cheating. A lot of students actually say they don't want to use it because they know they're not meant to, because at the minute policies and guidebooks are telling them they shouldn't use it for teaching and learning and for assessment. So actually they get scared of it because at the moment their tutors are really going against it. So I think it would go back to the challenge actually, when is assessments going to actually catch up with this? If we know students can use AI for these reasons, are we going to make more critical learners from the fact that they can generate new ideas that they haven't thought about? The fact that they can interact with an AI when the teacher and the organisation is closed for the night. So I think it's understanding what they can and cannot do with that. But it's not just about the cheating. So most students use AI as a learning support tool, not to bypass effort. We are very clear that some do, but not all of them. I think the confidence gap, only 5% of students feel confident about using AI, is actually a bigger problem at the moment. And I think that also feeds into staff. At the moment, the confidence gap between what AI can do and what it should do are very, very close things. And the grey area is only 26% view AI's use in assessment as plagiarism. So again, what it comes down to is the boundaries remain unclear. And I'm really, I always talk about, there is actually no rule books on AI. We set our rules as an organisation. So actually there's nothing that says we cannot use AI as part of education. What we are almost doing is putting in the blockers ourselves. So again, it opens up that question, what are we trying to stop? So if you then start thinking about, how do we integrate AI? We need to start thinking about what that looks like for the student. So the reality is AI is everywhere. So I'll tell you about a little bit of an example from myself. So I've started doing a senior leadership apprenticeship. So I've gone back to being a student. And so I'm integrating with and attending sessions with other people that are on the course. And one of the things that I found with my first assignment as a really good way of kind of testing this, I realised I could not do my assignment with some sort of AI popping up. So what I mean by that is I went onto the library searches. All of them are AI driven now. It says AI use. It will summarise those journals for me. It will start finding other journals that are relevant. So if I follow the policy of no AI use, I've already broken the policy. And that is something that is just ingrained within the systems that we've got. Then I'll go to my Word document where I start typing up my work, and because I've got Copilot in it, it starts giving me suggestions about how to make it better. What have I missed? What could I put as extra content? So already, even without me engaging with AI, AI is there for me, ready to hook onto me and to be integrated into the systems that I've got. When you start looking at that, it's kind of like if I follow the a lot of policies. So if you read your internal policies, you might start realizing if you say no AI use for assessment, actually it's pretty near enough impossible to avoid it. So it shows up in all the systems. As I've said already, Apple have just released that they've got all their new updates, and AI is very much the forefront of it, very much like Microsoft trying to put Copilot into every part of it. When we start looking at library tools, other resources that students use for research, it's all AI driven now to help you discover more, to prompt you more, to look for things and nudge you down a particular pathway. So when we say don't use AI, do we actually mean don't use ChatGPT? Do we actually mean don't use embedded features within the tools that you've given me as an organization? The gap creates confusion, and I think the confusion is where the mistake happens, and arguably that's where the misconduct happens. So if a student is truly honest about what they've been doing, they indirectly or directly have used AI. So we've got to start thinking about the process of assessment rather than the outcomes of assessment, because the outcomes is where we always concentrate. But if we know an AI can do the outcome, maybe we need to look at where the student's doing the thinking, where they're doing the prompting, and how does the actual relationship between the student and the AI happen. So again, we need to think about policy. We need to ensure that we understand the environment that we put our students within. If we wrote the rules for a world where AI was optional, students live in a world where AI is abundant and in the place. So we've got to start thinking about how do we ensure that this is covered. So very clearly, I mentioned the fact about the policy. So confusion isn't integrity, it's anxiety. So when we start asking the question, what's allowed to students, we get mixed messages and students interpret it in different ways. And if you're like many organisations, there is some that still allow different departments to decide how they integrate AI. But all that causes is confusion from the support staff point of view, but also from the students' point of view, particularly if they talk to friends on other courses. So signposting is easily missed. So as we know, you can put AI statements within assignment briefs, within handbooks, but how do we know the students have truly read that? I know we ask them to, we encourage them to, and we enforce them to, but often we don't know if that message is getting across. When there is mixed messages, it creates some sort of uncertainty. So how do staff pass on that message? And is every team member on that same page? Because I can really tell you that one of a department that I know was embracing AI, they still had some staff in lessons that would say, yes, you can use AI. However, if you use AI, I think that actually you're cheating and you're not doing it. But I've got to tell you that you're able to use AI. So if not everyone's on the same page, where does the student sit with that? Also, is there a bit of an unbiased opinion from that member of staff if they find out a student has used it, even though the policy says you can, but they don't agree with it? So again, they're questions that you've got to keep asking yourself. Uncertainty drives the fear and sometimes bad decisions. So then you start thinking about if a student has got their back against the wall, they know AI is there, but we've not incorporated it into the process, students will try and find a way. And one of the questions that I often ask staff is, do you not feel that a student that would use AI in the wrong way, non-ethically, write their whole assignment without doing any work, if AI wasn't around, do you still not think they would find a way, whether that would be an essay mill or going to a friend to write it for them or copying off a friend? So actually, it's the behaviours of the students we need to keep publicising and thinking about what do they do? How do they get around that? What are the rules saying? What makes a safe space for a student to actually work on things? So again, it's things to start asking yourself. What we deem as staff, what we think is the message, very much ask the students, because they totally and utterly see it from a different point of view. So the argument is detection isn't the strategy. So we already talk about Turnitin has the AI checker, but we know very quickly that the evolving world of AI, the checkers aren't quick enough to actually keep up with it. So actually, why are we bothering keep looking at detection and to get the student into trouble? What we should be trying to do is think about how do we package that to make sure that they feel ready. So when we look at AI detection tools, we cannot reliably identify the AI generated content and will not be used as sole evidence in a lot of the cases that we see. So arguably the detection tool is just part of the conversation, doesn't often take over. So it's not a minor detail, but at the end of the day, the strategy of using detection cannot carry the weight. So we need to stop building the entire system on detection. It's not about softer rules, it's not about harsher penalties, it's about assessment being clear, the expectations are clear, the design is robust to allow the student to embrace AI in a way, but it is not the way that it's measured, and we've got teachable integrity. The other part is to make sure that the design of the assessment is the solid foundation of all this. So we keep talking about just get rid of AI because they're using it for cheating. It's about how do we ensure that assessment has a very mixed approach to that. So how do we stop AI? We ask that quite often, but actually we're trying to think of from policy of AI to designing for learning. So stop asking for what evidence of the we need to start asking what evidence of learning do we need. So when we start thinking about the way that students create assessments, if we stick to the assignments from home, how do we ensure that we make sure that the assessment is easily not just put into AI and stopped in that way? There is a bit of a discussion here about what about ensuring that the AI is being used to educate and stretch the learner. We need to start thinking about how do we ensure that they use that as part of the process of giving evidence of what they've learned. So AI can generate a polished text, so the finished product, because but it becomes less reliable as proof of learning. So the center of gravity shifts from product to process and from output to judgments. Your policy direction already points towards redesign using authentic assessment, oral components, process-based tasks, reflective elements, and higher order skills. This is the moment to say something proactive. We need to start being proactive in what we ask students to actually present as their output. If our assessment can be completed by an AI with minimal understanding, then the assessment is telling us something. It's not telling us students are dishonest, it's telling us our task design is very fragile. So redesigning areas where the students can actually talk about what they've learned will show if they truly understand it. If we give them process-based tasks, so we can actually see that the way that they go through coming to their answer is a really important part. Having reflective elements, so if they used AI, they can reflect back on what was right, what was wrong, what they agreed with, what they disagreed with. But also being that creative side and having the higher order skills is actually going to show more of what they're coming out with. So again, it's things to consider. Now, at the university that we're at Lincoln, we are now moving over to what a lot of other organisations are doing, which is looking at trying to make clarity of the assessment. We're using the traffic light approach. Now, I have pros and cons for this. I think it's a good way to introduce to level the playing field for students and staff. It's about ensuring we have clarity in a framework. So as we move through from this kind of into practice, what we're trying to do is red is for no AI for the assessment. So that should be a rare occasion. So exams, for example, shouldn't be using AI if it's a timed exam that has got, you know, everyone in the room under exam conditions. We can quite clearly see that that is the student. We can't use AI in that example. That's where that is at. We then need to kind of move over to the amber, which is AI supported. So it's more of an optional thing. It, but cannot be used to meet the learning outcomes as a whole. It requires the guidance and transparency to show that AI has been permitted to support the outcome, but not is the driving force of the learning outcomes. And then we've got it as green is obviously learning outcomes are critical. That AI use is a potential tool that can be used for the student to have in. Now, there is this talk about forcing students to use AI, and I think that's got to be very clear that green doesn't mean a student has to use AI, but what it means is that the student has the option of using evidence that is come from AI as well as other sources. But again, it's about the processing where the student has got the evidence and the information. So it's not about, we don't need one rule for everything, we just need one language that students can understand. Because when you start in my current role in the Centre for Student Success, we see so many students that when we talk about AI to them, they are still very, very concerned. And I think the language is the most important thing, because they are very, very hell-bent on, most of them not breaking the rules, but some of them breaking the rules and trying to test to see if that's okay or not. So a good example of that is a student came into the library and asked, oh, can I have a look at the AI score for Turnitin for my work? And obviously that is very much a staff-driven tool. So I said to the learner, well, you know, arguably you shouldn't be using AI, so you shouldn't need the tool, because if you haven't used it, you know there will be no AI detection. If students did get hold of them AI detection tools, then it would turn into a game, and they would very much try and make sure that their score would get lower and lower. So again, it's considering how we ensure that the students are clear what we are doing. So that, again, that's the staff explaining what the AI tool is in Turnitin, but also that that's not the driver for checking their work. So I think the missing piece is the assessment briefs that reduce misconduct. So it's got to be clear on every assignment brief which mode you're using, what tools are allowed, what AI can be used for and what it can't be used for. So be really clear. You know, this assessment will allow you to use AI for planning your assessment, but is not allowed to generate your outputs. You know, particularly if it's testing an element of, you know, their English or their written work. It's just about being really clear, and also making students declare where things are. So it's not about stopping it, it's about trying to close that gap. And arguably, there's a lot of discussion about, well, that's going to cause students a lot more work. Well, if they're using AI to be efficient, they will have more time to declare how they've used AI. So again, try and think about the processes that we're trying to get students through. So we want to close the gap. We want to make sure the boundaries are very clear, because if they're invisible, inconsistent, or implied rather than stated, then students are going to use that to their advantage. And that will mean that they will also potentially be hindered depending on if they needed that support and they don't know how to be clear that they've been using it. So again, providing the guidelines are the most important thing. We need to talk about acceptable use a lot more. We need to have templates to show students what it looks like to include AI into their assessment. How does that look? How does it look to declare that you've put stuff in it? So clarity is the prevention. That is the best way to kind of keep it clear, because I think the fact that AI is where it is now, we're not going to stop it. And again, AI will keep evolving. So transparency that students can do, declaration and referencing. We need to make sure that students are clear about how do they actually put that together. So talking about the tools that they use, so that helps us as the teaching staff and the support staff as well. What it is used for and what is it, how has it influenced their work. So when we talk about this reflective side, that is quite an important part of this process. So, you know, if we keep treating AI as a got you kind of approach, that we've caught you out, or if we treat AI as if we treat AI use as a literacy practice, or students learn to disclose and critique it, we're going to get students that are actually going to be well-rounded individuals. And I think we've got to remember that the bigger kind of driver for all this is actually starting to think about, where are the students going once they leave where you are? If they're going on to university or if they're going into work, what does that look like? And we've got to start thinking about how industry is using AI as well. And you'd argue in industry, it would be about declaring the tools that they're using. So if you talk to employers, which I've done quite a bit just recently, one of the employers was talking about, well, we use AI and we tell our workers that we're expecting them to use AI, and they did stuff around data. But the one thing they said was, yeah, we expect the new employees to use the AI, but what we actually want them to do is understand the data first. So one of the big things is we go back to what is the real reason we want students to use it. We want them to understand the information that they're putting in it. So again, getting them to be transparent and clear on how they're using it is very important. We need to start thinking about the inclusivity as well. You know, the tools that AI have and the way that they can support learners is such a powerful thing. So when you have a powerful internal example for transcribing meetings on AI, the discussion highlights that AI generated answers were identified through inverted cases and irrelevant research. So when we've got to ensure that when students generate them answers, that they are checking the accuracy, because we know the strength of the answer really depends on the questions the students ask. So again, we go back to the students to ensure that they understand what they're asking and what's coming out of that. So we need to start pivoting this, that we assess what the judgments, the outputs that the AI gives. We need to ensure that there's accuracy, that there's no errors, that we improve the response using disciplined knowledge, and reflect on what the AI has got wrong and why. So the goal, again, isn't AI proof in the assessment. The goal is about the assessment that makes thinking unavoidable. We want students to think, and if AI is used properly, then actually students will think more clearly. So again, we need to think about how do we ensure that students understand outputs of AI, and the way we do that is by staff integrating it within the teaching and learning even before assessment. So it's about teaching the students what's right and wrong. And I think one of the big things that we often discuss is that staff don't feel comfortable with that because they might not know how the AI is used. What I would always suggest, and I always have done with technology, there's nothing wrong with experimenting and understanding AI by working alongside the students. Let them show you what they're doing, let them show you what their outputs are, then use that as a bit of a learning tool. So you may not be the master in the room, but what you are doing is starting up those conversations, and I argue that is the most important side. So the future proofing of assessment isn't anti-AI, it's pro-learning. So I go back to stop centering detection as the driver, start centering judgment, so judgments from the student, what they are putting together, what comes out from AI, if they are using it in that way, to make it understanding how they're using it as part of a process of learning, not just the output of learning. So co-creation of assessment is really good with that, because it starts you to think about what the student is doing. Start thinking about transparency, so stop making it an ugly word that, you know, if a student dare say the word AI, well, I've caught you out that you're using it, so actually you're going to be in trouble for that. So we've got to think of the assessment culture here. How do we treat learners to manage the risks, to think about what they are developing? And then the last thing is obviously thinking about inclusion. There is some students that we have some departments in the university that have embraced AI and actually had modules that it's used AI as part of the assessment. One of the things that they actually found out is some of the students that didn't get as good a grades without AI actually got better grades with AI. And what that was they were more critical. And it was really funny that some of the students that you don't normally get high grades got lower grades. And that kind of showed that the reflection of some of them students was better when they used AI. Now, there is an argument here of saying, well, using mixed methods, as we always mention about mixed methods of assessment, AI can awaken certain critical skills that maybe students can't show in a very flat essay approach to assessment. So again, this inclusivity, the inclusion of students that don't always present in the right way or write in the right way, AI is definitely something that they can use. So again, it's about thinking about how we look at institutional policy that supports this, but also thinking about how we're enabling and enhancing learning through AI and using it as a catalyst to support these students, and to make sure that the emphasis is on human oversight, not just using AI as the output. So again, giving students one clear message: learn it, use it ethically, and show your thinking. And I think if we can get on that, that will be part of the battle kind of won, really, just to get both staff and students to start thinking about things differently. But again, it's taking a step back to think about the student. So my last slide, and then we can go on to questions. And if anyone, I've seen there's been a few comments along the way. I was flicking through social media, and there was a guy that makes music, and he was talking about AI taking over the music industry. And he said, he was talking about that, there is a worry that, where is creativity coming from? And this is something that he said. He said, in a world of AI, your freedom is in the unpredictability of it. Large language models trained to be the most predictable. So actually, the most meaningful things for us is often not predictable. So if we think about that when we look at assessment, it's true. If we are making an assessment that is predictable what the answer is, you're going to get an answer that AI can do very quickly. But if you actually get a student to think about their own thoughts, reflect on their own feelings, all of a sudden, that's unpredictable. And actually, when you're marking the work, you will find that the work is not a clone of each other, that actually is going to show the creativity, the understanding from that student's point of view. So I thought that was really interesting, particularly, and I've put the link there and I can share the slides afterwards, which I'm sure Andy and Liam can share with you all. But, look at the link. It's very interesting the way that he looks at AI. And he said, if we are allowing AI to take over because we're letting it do all the predictable things, over time, creativity will come back anyway, because all we'll have is a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone, because the predictability will stay the same. So again, being really flexible and understanding what we can do with AI to support people to be creative is the important part. It's not about replacing one or the other. We are the catalyst. The person, the human at the center of AI is still the controller. But what we've got to really think about is, how does assessment change, and how do we understand the way that students approach assessment, and how do we really show the process of their learning rather than just the outputs. That's me done.
Wow, Phil. I told everyone right at the very beginning it'd be quite thought-provoking about what you've actually done. I know David's done a comment in there, and David might have some questions that he wants to ask you anyway. But he mentioned that he tried to do the link, but it said it was like protected or something about selected user accounts. So I don't know whether you're able to do it. Okay, well, I'll let you do. I'll let you see if you can do that in the meantime. But I just had certain questions, and hopefully while other people are having to think about things. It was just the way in which it linked to teaching and learning and libraries and all those type of things. And it was the way you made me think, because what you said about teaching and learning is it's more or less the way in which teaching has developed as well. No longer is the traditional teacher standing at the front of the room giving out information. What you've got is the teacher, the lecturer, whoever it is going to be the person, in my opinion, based upon what you've just said, is the person now guiding. That the student itself can actually get the information, can't they? So it's about the guiding and doing that. And what you said as well was about, have we got present exam systems, GCSEs, A-levels, which are now still set up to regurgitating facts, memorize. But what you've said is, now with AI and the lecturers possibly in Lincoln and other universities and colleges, they're asking questions that aren't about just regurgitating facts, but now about critical thinking. So it's taking people to that next level. And then it also brought back, before I finish things, that actually it's about scaffolding. It's now the AI is being the scaffold to learning to help people. And also I bring back, obviously I'm a dinosaur and quite old when I did my degree, those days of going to the library, finding out the right book, which unfortunately, when you went to get the book, someone else had already got it out. Then you've got to make sure that you're not actually just copying out great sections of a book and then not putting down the reference. So what it actually is taking all those things that I did in my degree and teaching and learning, but now making it modern and for the future. But that's me now. That's my opinion. But I don't know whether you've got a comment on that, Phil, or whether anyone else has. And it's time for the people to ask some questions as well.
I really think that it's really difficult when we get anything that's kind of transformational like AI. It kind of shakes up what we do as the norm, and I think it's very easy to kind of think, have I got time to change everything to meet the needs of this tool, this product that's come out? And I think you've got to stop thinking like that and think about how does it supplement what you already do. So I think like some really good examples is, as you say, like scaffolding your learning. So we've got a lot of tutors at the minute that are making AI bots that are doing role play scenarios. So one of the big things is, you know, if you ask students, right, we're going to do a role play, here's like a script, you talk that out and then you're going to talk to each other. Well, we know that some students really hate that, you don't get any kind of real value. So what they've started to do is training a AI bot role play to actually get the students to correspond with someone that's almost in the industry to give them real good conversations. And because the tutor has put in the information they want to be shared, all of a sudden the students are getting a richer kind of experience. Now that is just a really basic tool they can integrate into their teaching and learning. It's not about changing lots of things, it's just changing an activity. And I think this is just kind of the statement I always say is, technology is going to shake things up, but technology will carry on changing. And as if you quite rightly said, in our eras, we always use different things. So one of the other questions I often have with staff, at the moment before AI, students will Google answers. So they would ask Google, you know, what do you do for this? We're now saying that's acceptable, but what isn't acceptable is asking an AI to do that. So I have done it before where I've done an output from Google, an output from AI, and I put it on the screen. I said, right, what's the difference between these two? And like staff are like, well, nothing. And I said, it's because it's literally the same question, just one's on AI, one's on Google. But if the learner told you I went on Google, you wouldn't put them in trouble. But if you said you went on AI, you'd make them in trouble. So I think we've just got to keep thinking about how do we live with AI around us rather than replace things or replace ourselves or anything else. Like you say, it's the scaffolding of the learning.
Don't know if David, because got David Callahan has been putting some great comments in.
Yeah.
I don't know if he wants to say anything about this because he's got different ones about crutches and things. So I don't know if he's willing to actually say anything.
Oh, come on. Phil, wonderful. Highly aligns with what we're doing here at School of Tropical Medicine in Liverpool. Just one comment really rather than question. One of the things you keep coming back to is staff being reluctant, staff seeing it's cheating, staff seeing all. And whenever staff come on to me like that, one of the first things I say to them is, has your organisation signed up to the Russell Group Principles of AI Use in Education? And of course they'll say yes. And say, so you do you know what they are? Oh yeah. What's number one? Let's have a look what number one is. And if you
Sorry, David, you've popped yourself on mute there.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you for picking me up. So basically, at that point, as soon as I drop that line into them, most of them tend to get on board with it quite quickly. Some of them start putting up defences, but a lot of staff will actually see it's, oh yeah, so we got to use it as a support, as a lever rather than, yeah, which is exactly your point, Phil, of what's the difference between Google and AI these days. And the other thing, yeah. No, I'm going to leave it there. I tend to dominate these things. Sorry, I'll go away there.
I do think that the staff discussions are a really big thing, and I think going from a small organisation to a very much bigger organisation, that journey is very different for me, because I think in a college I had a lot more the ears of a lot more staff in one hit, where at the university it's very split. And I think there is a change in thoughts, and I think staff are obviously realizing that there's a need for a change, and I think that will come with time. But at the moment there's still a lot of staff that are probably more scared of what's coming rather than actually understanding what they want to get from it or not want to get from it. So I feel like we're going down the right direction and the right conversations are happening. I just think, as we know, education's going through redundancies, cost cutting, all the things that we already know. We do need staff to have time to really digest this, put that into assessment briefs, into redesigning, and actually it comes back to, we need senior leadership to be more accountable for understanding the impact that it will have for staff to take on board of AI, and not just say staff need to be aware of AI and start embracing it. So there is a bit of work, and again, that's what the University of Lincoln's really good at the minute. We've got a lot more scope to discuss with senior leadership about the changes, about what we want to achieve, getting the support of senior leadership. And that is the only way we're starting to make real change now, because previously it was almost like a selective. We would give the information, would make it clear, but often that would make it really difficult for staff to embrace.
Both Tristan and Orla have both said something in here. I don't know if either of those are willing to say. Orla said about the internal baccalaureate, so I don't know if she's able to clarify that a bit more. Don't know. And Tristan said something.
Oh, let me read back what Tristan put.
Oh, Tristan said he'd love to, but he hasn't got a microphone. So.
Yeah, I agree. Tristan's talking about the inclusivity of things and how it's helping to organise ideas. And I mean, this is the way that I've always said to staff. You know, if we deliver to students that AI isn't a companion, it's something to support you. It's like having someone next to you when you're doing your work and you just turn over and go, oh, I've been writing about this, what do you think? And then getting ideas from them. So I do think there's a real big thing about how do we get students to think about organising their thoughts, their ideas. And often if we found out they did that with a peer, that they had that discussion, we'd be accepting of it. So again, we're using AI as almost like, oh, we can't use AI to do the same thing though. It's like, how do we pick and choose what's acceptable and what isn't? So again, I think, yeah, is right. The fact that it helps the ability to sort and decode ideas is really good. All this question, the concept of using these tools and awakening critical thinking is clear. Humanity, did you take it? I didn't personally take it from the International Baccalaureate. I think it's through many different conversations that we've started to argue how do we start thinking about how students critique information in general, and I think this is probably where universities, if they start embracing it, will be really good at this. But no, I didn't particularly get it from that area, but that is interesting, which I will look into to understand more, to see if what they have been saying. But it is about organisations supporting things as much as possible. And again, this is a good thing as well, and this is something I've had horror stories of this. So yes, a student, I think, should put their assignments through AI to understand it more, because sometimes, again, students will make out the listening, or they can't you know, take on what you're saying in the lessons, so they go away and look at the assessment and feel lost. There is some horror stories on the internet where some lecturers are putting in terminology within an assignment in white. So if a student puts it into AI, they'll know, because the AI will put within the content something that shouldn't be there. Now, obviously, that would be cheating, that would be deceitful from the teaching staff. But supposedly on the internet, there was an article about this, and it was saying that some staff were not wanting students to use it, so they are finding ways to trap students to prove that they've used AI. Now, it did say in the article that when that got put through to a board, the member of staff got in trouble because obviously it is being deceitful, but also there was questions about, well, how have you supported the student with the assessment for them to have to put it through AI in the first place? So there's lots of questions around that, but it is very true that actually, why shouldn't a learner put through, can you explain what the assignment is asking for me, so they can process it and get their mind around it? I don't see what the problem is there. That's, again, we go back to, would we put a student through a disciplinary that asked their an uncle that was really knowledgeable in the area, and they explained it to them? So again, we're using AI as almost like we put AI on a pedestal too much. And this is the other conversation I've had quite regularly about cheating, is why do we bother more about AI than actually looking for contract cheating? Because that's still there, but it's harder to identify contract cheating. So why, if a student uses AI or contract cheating or some other means, it's still cheating. It doesn't matter if it's AI or not.
If anyone else has got any questions here, Phil, you seem to have blown people's minds this afternoon. Are you able to look at, see if anyone's completed that questionnaire?
Yeah, I've got some more now. I just need to open it up to look at the old answers. Let's see if it's come through on my
Because while you're doing it, Alison's put something in the chat about students feeling that sometimes pass AI work as their own. But I suppose, as you mentioned, it could be down to the title, it could be down to the task that's been asked to do it and things like that. So I suppose some students are now caught in that dilemma between fairness, unfairness, cheating, not cheating.
So I go back to what I put on the slides. How clear are we in the assignment briefs about how do groups work together, and how can AI be used in those groups? Because it's true. I mean, I've had feedback before that there has been feedback from teaching staff that they've had students that have said, I know someone in my group has used AI. I've told them they can't use it, and yet they still have, and I can't get any other work out of them. So again, then it puts the pressure on the student. Do they call out that student for using AI? So I suppose what I'd argue is, yes, students are going to use AI as part of a group presentation, and whether it's clear or not, admitted or not. And I think what we need to think about is, how do we ensure that students use AI in the right way in a group activity? Because actually, if we look at project management, which is a skill we want students to go away with, if we look in industry, do you not think that project managers are now using AI? So we now got to start thinking about, how do we put that within the assessment? How do we ensure that those things are declared in some way? And it does make it difficult because, like I say, the problem then comes that the whole group could get in trouble for that one learner using AI. So again, it comes back to clarity, making sure it's clear, and making sure the declaration of AI use is clear, that the students put that forward. And arguably, you could say, if a student declares that they've used AI and the rest of the group knows they've used AI, they should get a lower grade potentially. But again, that's kind of what we need to start thinking about and go through. My little word cloud keeps changing, but the response is, keep clicking on the wrong one. Here we go. So again, emphasize ethical use of AI. So again, the kind of data privacy, which again is a big part, and a lot of students are worried about. I might have to go on the other one because that's been really glitchy. So I'll go to my proper output. So yeah, some of the answers are yeah, we need to stop relying on AI as a crutch and use it as a lever. I think this is David. He shared his link, which is good of him to show us the documentation they're using. Again, the organisation position on AI, academic integrity is central, which, you know, part of the work we've done at Lincoln is we've worked really heavily with governance and the policy teams to make sure that we're clear that when we change a policy, the impact it has across the board rather than just directly with small groups. Because the other thing we're finding is that IT were introducing new AI tools to learners, and then we were saying they couldn't use them. Teaching and learning then was saying that they could use them in certain ways, and IT didn't know. So we're trying to make a collective approach. So we do have AI governance groups where it's got people from lots of different areas together to discuss these things. So we make sure that it's more centralized to make the changes. Actively encourage and support. So some people have got a supportive AI policy in their organisation. This is a tool to deploy an assessment risk to control. And another one has said that they've got a real emphasis on ethical uses of AI, especially the generative AI, and the focus is on learning what learning has been achieved and successful measures, not an AI. Not if AI has been used. So yeah, that's yeah, thanks for that kind of feedback. It was just interesting to know what organisations are saying. Like I say, across the sector, when I've spoken in HE, it's a very mixed bag, and I know colleges seem to be more on it at the time, but I don't know if they still are or not.
No, I think from experience, when I end up speaking to various education establishments, schools, colleges, universities, adult learning, everybody is in a different position. And sometimes it's about putting your head above the parapet because you don't know if you're going to be right. So everyone's waiting for other people to make decisions, but they don't know what decisions to make and who's going to be right or wrong. So it is in uncertainty, but there's got to be some pathfinders like yourself, Phil, that are willing to lead, you know, to do this. Because obviously, I take it from what you've said, even though you're part of Lincoln University, a lot of what you've said in this is your own opinion, isn't it? Or is it the university?
So it's been a mixed bag, if I'm honest. When I first started at the uni, I would say they were a year and a half behind what I'd already done in another organisation. And they were still very much talking about just policy, how they were going to kind of stop cheating. And that was their focus. And all I said was, why are you not getting staff to use it? I said, because how can you set anything if staff haven't had a go themselves? So one of the first things I did, because I was originally with digital education before going into the library, and due to restructures I've ended up in the library, but one of the first things in digital education I did was put on sessions that we supported staff in having a go and actually getting them to understand what we were talking about, and that was a real eye-opener for most. So I do put a lot of my opinion on to the university and try and use that as a bit of a leverage to say, look, I may not have all the answers, I'm not saying I have, but I always pose the questions and then let them think about that to then look at change. And I think one of the big turning points for me was kind of about 6 months ago. I was in a senior leadership meeting that I was invited to about AI, and I said, look, you've got two choices. One is you wait for someone else to do it and we follow that crowd, or we just embrace it and we have an AI enabled curriculum that allows staff to feel empowered to put AI in, and we're not scared of it, and we change the policy to reflect that. And that's the choice that the senior leadership said, was to go down the route of let's open it up, because if we don't, we're just going to be further behind. And I would argue, from my personal opinion and like analysing the sector, we are quite ahead in some places, but still behind in others. And I think it often comes down to the amount of staff you have got that are focusing just on AI. I think the organisations that have teams that are, you know, they've got like an AI centre of excellence or something like that, they're moving a lot quicker because they've got people that just focus on that. Where, you know, Lincoln being a slightly smaller one, we've got people from different departments that are driving different elements, and I'm part of that team. But that's not my only focus in the university. But my input now is like the impact it has on the student and not just the staff member, where before I was very much supporting the staff. But it's all important. Everyone's got to be on the journey at the same time.
Yeah, it just brings back memories, you know. Sorry for interrupting the people if they want to speak, but I just, you know, obviously I've been in education for many years, and it's all the journeys that have been going on. I remember, like, for example, school offices where they used to have the typewriter. When the computer first came in, it was like, whoa, what do we want this for? You know, it's just going to take up more room. Or in delivering teaching, it was the interactive whiteboard, and that, oh, I don't want one of those things. What am I going to do with that? I'd rather stick with the old chalkboard. And then it was planning, and you put planning on the computer. Why would I want to do that when I've got like handwritten? Why can I do it? So education is constantly evolving, and I suppose it is about people not being scared and willing to give it a go.
Yes.
So, you know, thank you very much, Phil. And obviously today's session, if you don't mind me just sharing a slide or two, all right. Today's session was brought to you by Deventure Education. It's a software company, but it develops and is very forward thinking in what it's actually creating. So it's the home, and we obviously create lots of different solutions for universities, colleges, schools, and one of the areas is what we call school IP, which also has a derivative called college IP, which is all about aligning all the aspects of your organization. So in the case of here, I'm showing you a slide about school IP, but it could be college IP. It's about just college improvement, school improvement, bringing together all the processes to make things effective. The idea of whether it be appraisal, CPD, monitoring of lessons, quality assurance, but the idea of creating dashboards so everyone's able to see what's going on. And our big mantra, which is exactly the same as what AI is about regarding teaching and learning, is about reducing workload. So as we start going through, and for those that want to find out more, we offer a free unlimited support and training. We create systems that are bespoke to organizations. There's not like one side, everyone has to do it this particular way. We're backed up with various people in education, and we have a team that understands schools. And for those that want to find out more, obviously you can get in touch with Liam, and he will talk to you about different things. Click on this QR code, and just to find out what Deventure Education can do and what it can bring to your organization. And I know in the past, Phil, you've actually used it in one of your organizations, so that's on that, helping on that one really. But thank you very much, Phil, for all that. And I dare say people might actually add more things in the chat. And I know Liam will send out the recording. I don't know if you're able to send out, Phil, the outcomes of the questionnaire as well. I don't know. Or does whether it has people's names attached.
No, well,
interesting.
I can copy with just the responses with no other information, so I can do that, and I'll share the slides with you so you can share them with everyone as well. Or I can put them into the chat actually, couldn't I?
I don't know on that one, Phil. Your technology. I was quite impressed by your slideshow, where all of a sudden you had responses feeding that. That's something else I might need to go and find out how to do that. So I'm learning the whole time. But no, thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has got any other questions before we leave for today.
No, thanks again, Phil. Thanks.
Well, not by the looks of it. Just loads of praises for Phil there in the chat. So yes, thank you very much for your time, Phil. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, David, for elevating the conversation as well. I'll be in touch later today with the recording and slideshow for anyone that wants to watch it back or share with colleagues.